In early 2024, more than 12,000 supermarkets belonging to major retail chains from across Europe all removed Doritos from their shelves at the same time. The snack aisle that had once had that familiar orange glow were suddenly left with cold, empty spaces. At the same time, across social media, millions of consumers could no longer hide their disgust and extreme anger. The shocking event raised one enormous question. Why did Doritos, one of America's most beloved national snacks, collapse even after its most loyal customers turned their back on it? It all began with an accidental discovery in 1964 at Disneyland. At the time, the Casa de Fritos restaurant was struggling with thousands of stale tortilla shells being thrown away every day. A salesman came up with the idea of cutting the leftover shells into smaller pieces, deep frying them, and covering them with traditional Mexican seasoning to recover some of the cost. No one expected this snack, made from discarded leftovers, to sell so quickly that the restaurant couldn't produce enough. Arch West, a vice president at Frito-Lay, immediately saw a gold mine. He realized that this was an extremely cheap product to manufacture. Yet, it delivered a bold and satisfying crunch. Frito-Lay quickly spread Doritos across the United States. The company was not selling a bag of chips. It was selling an affordable pleasure. It was a bright and colorful snack that anyone could casually throw into a shopping cart without stopping to consider the price. But Frito-Lay did not stop with that simple original product. In 1972, the arrival of the nacho cheese flavor created a turning point that permanently changed the history of the snack food industry. Scientists in Frito-Lay's laboratories spent tens of millions of dollars adjusting the perfect balance of saltiness, richness, and a small amount of sweetness. This combination precisely targeted the brain's pleasure center, forcing it to release a massive amount of dopamine without creating a feeling of fullness or flavor fatigue. The biological manipulation did not stop there. It was also built into the structure of the chip itself. Doritos were designed to create an illusion of calories. When you chew them, the air bubbles inside cause the chip to collapse and dissolve quickly into your mouth. This sensation tricks the nervous system into believing that you have just eaten something extremely light. It quietly turns off the body's fullness signal, causing you to reach into the bag again and again without thinking, simply to maintain the pleasure. Once Frito-Lay had created the perfect addictive product, it began a campaign to conquer popular culture. The most famous example was the Crash the Super Bowl campaign. Instead of hiring expensive celebrities, the company invited ordinary people to pick up their own cameras and create Doritos commercials. This brilliant move completely erased the boundary between a cold corporation and ordinary customers. Doritos worked its way into every corner of everyday life. It became an essential snack for gamers, the soul of student parties, and a familiar food found anywhere people gathered to laugh. The brand's total dominance and the blind love of its customers accidentally concealed a trap. PepsiCo's leadership began to believe that the brand was immortal, and that belief gave the company one of the most ruthless powers on the economic chessboard: the freedom to raise prices. Everything began sliding out of control during the brutal years of 2020 and 2021. The COVID-19 pandemic struck, causing severe disruptions throughout the global supply chain. The cost of raw materials, such as corn and cooking oil, rose sharply, along with packaging, energy, and ground transportation expenses. Faced with soaring production costs, PepsiCo's leadership had two choices: accept lower profit margins and share the burden with consumers, or pass the costs directly on the consumers. They chose the second option. At first, the market accepted small price increases ranging from a few cents to several dozen cents. Consumers understood the difficult conditions affecting the entire economy. But that calm reaction from the market unintentionally activated the corporation's greed. Between 2021 and 2023, even as inflation began to cool and supply chain costs gradually stabilized, PepsiCo did not stop. It carried out one rapid price increase after another. The price of a regular bag of Doritos rose from $4 to $5, then to $6. In many major cities, a large bag reached nearly $7. Over a 3-year period, the retail price of Doritos rose by almost 50%. Alongside direct price increases, PepsiCo also used a ruthless hidden strategy: shrinkflation. In 2022, observant customers discovered that Doritos family bags had been reduced from 9.75 ounces to 9.25 ounces. This meant that PepsiCo had quietly removed around 5 to 7 chips from each bag, while the listed price did not fall at all. In fact, it continued to rise. The financial mechanism behind this strategy was simple but sinister. PepsiCo's leadership recognized a rule inside its Excel spreadsheets. If the selling price rose by 15%, while the number of bags sold declined by only 5%, the corporation's total revenue and net profit would still grow strongly. It could sell fewer bags, use less corn and cheese, spend less on transportation, and still collect more cash from every unit sold. The financial reports continued, showing numbers that looked like a dream. Revenues from Frito-Lay North America recorded double-digit growth across multiple quarters. Executives received enormous bonuses. During meetings with Wall Street shareholders, PepsiCo's leadership confidently declared that its empire possessed absolute pricing power. It believed customers bought Doritos because of emotion, nostalgia, and addictive taste habits, so a higher price could never weaken that love. But the company failed to see the cracks accumulating beneath the surface. Consumers were not stupid. They began to feel insulted. Their love for the brand was no longer a connection to happiness. It had become a trap that allowed the corporation to drain every last dollar from their wallets. By 2023, the elastic cord of customer loyalty had officially snapped. The anger was no longer limited to isolated complaints. It exploded into a large-scale boycott movement. On Reddit, the r/shrinkflation community became a place where consumers posted thousands of comparison photos. They placed Doritos bags purchased in 2020 beside bags purchased in 2024. They weighed every gram, counted every chip, and exposed the truth that today's $7 bags were mostly filled with inflated air. On TikTok, countless videos received millions of views by showing users pouring a family-sized bag of Doritos onto a plate. The modest amount of chips barely covered the bottom of a small bowl. The comments underneath were filled with bitter jokes. Doritos is no longer selling tortilla chips. It is selling cheese-flavored air. This dissatisfaction quickly turned into real action. Consumers began switching to lower-priced products. Instead of automatically grabbing a bag of Doritos and placing it in their carts as they had before, customers began stopping in front of the shelves and making a rational calculation. Paying $7 for a cheap snack had crossed their psychological limit. They began buying private label alternatives from supermarket chains such as Walmart, Kroger, and Aldi. These private label snacks delivered around 80 to 90% of the Doritos flavor experience, but cost only half as much, usually between $2.50 and $3. At the same time, aggressive competitors such as Takis, owned by Grupo Bimbo, began tearing away market share. Takis strongly attracted Gen Z consumers with its extremely spicy flavors and more reasonable prices. This was the moment when one of the most devastating reversals of value caused by a pricing mistake became visible. Doritos had once been an emotional impulse purchase. Now, It had become an expense that required rational consideration. It had once represented bold flavor at an affordable price. Now it was a familiar flavor being sold at an outrageous price. Most importantly, Doritos had transformed from a brand that created happiness into a brand that charged consumers for nostalgia. The financial consequences immediately struck the corporation's balance sheet. Financial reports from 2023 and 24 showed that sales volume in Frito-Lay North America declined across several consecutive quarters. At first, higher prices still allowed total revenue to grow. But by 2024, sales volume had fallen so severely that higher prices could no longer compensate for that decline. For the first time in more than 13 years, PepsiCo's actual revenue recorded negative growth. The corporation missed its revenue target by more than $1 billion. PepsiCo's stock market value fell by more than $50 billion from its peak. The attractive numbers in the financial reports could no longer hide a bitter reality. Consumers had turned their backs on the company. The collapse in consumer demand quickly spread throughout the entire system. The hidden conflict between PepsiCo and its main distribution partners erupted into an open war across the retail market. Major supermarket chains realized that expensive bags of Doritos were gathering dust on their shelves, slowing inventory turnover and directly reducing the profits generated by every square foot of retail space. Customers were angry about the high prices and blamed the supermarkets themselves. Retailers decided that they no longer serve as agents of PepsiCo's greed. In January 2024, the French retail giant Carrefour, with more than 12,000 stores across Europe, launched a direct punishment. It removed all PepsiCo products, including Doritos, Lay's, and Pepsi, from its shelves. It also displayed public signs criticizing the corporation's pricing policies. Carrefour's action created an unprecedented example within the fast-moving consumer goods industry. Soon after, the battle spread across Europe. In Germany, the supermarket chain Edeka, which had once accounted for as much as 50% of PepsiCo's revenue in the country, joined the discount giants Aldi and Kaufland in stopping orders or reducing the shelf space given to Doritos. In the United States, retail giant Walmart also began pressuring PepsiCo on pricing, shrinking Frito-Lay's shelf space to make room for cheaper private label products. Squeezed from both sides, with consumers refusing to buy and retailers removing its products from shelves, PepsiCo's leadership was pushed into a corner. By September 2025, the aggressive activist hedge fund Elliott Management swooped in, acquiring a massive $4 billion stake in PepsiCo. Led by the notorious billionaire Paul Singer, Elliott effectively hijacked the boardroom. The executives who had proudly boasted about their pricing power were publicly humiliated. Stripped of their strategic autonomy and watching their massive performance bonuses vanish after missing revenue targets by over $1 billion, they were forced to swallow their pride. Under Elliott's iron fist, PepsiCo's leadership had to execute a brutal restructuring in late 2025. They were forced to fire thousands of their own employees, shut down manufacturing plants, and mercilessly eliminate nearly 20% of their entire product portfolio. This destroyed the very expansion projects the executives had once championed. Then, in February 2026, the company executed its most embarrassing surrender. PepsiCo announced a record price investment strategy, directly cutting retail prices by up to 15% on core brands like Doritos and Lay's across North American and European markets. But simply dropping the price was not enough. To win back infuriated retailers, PepsiCo had to bleed cash. They pumped tens of millions of dollars into aggressive trade promotions and slotting fees, practically begging supermarkets like Walmart and Carrefour to give them their shelf space back. To win back consumers, the marketing team orchestrated a massive public relations pivot. Executives publicly declared they had spent the past year listening closely to consumers and understood their financial strain. They rolled out new affordable price tiers and value-sized bags specifically designed to combat cheap private labels. Their marketing campaigns stripped away all luxury pretensions, aggressively returned to the nostalgic, core joy of the original Doritos. The results of this reversal appeared immediately. In PepsiCo's financial reports for the first and second quarters of 2026, Doritos sales volume recorded a strong recovery. Organic revenue in the snack division returned to positive growth of 2%. Consumers began buying the chips again as soon as prices returned to a reasonable level. The meaning of this recovery shattered every illusion held by the company's financial executives. Doritos had never started tasting worse. The brand had never lost its cultural appeal. Consumers had never stopped eating snack food. From beginning to end, there was only one problem: the unreasonable price created by greed. The bloody paradox of Doritos is not simply the story of a bag of seasoned tortilla chips. It is a classic lesson and a perfect indictment of the limits of greed in the modern market economy. PepsiCo spent more than half a century and billions of dollars on sophisticated food science research and highly advanced psychological marketing campaigns. It successfully built one of the most powerful brands in human history. It created a perfect money-printing machine, transforming the simple act of chewing and swallowing into a dopamine-filled entertainment ritual. But then, blindsided by Wall Street's extreme arrogance, the company's leadership developed an illusion. It believed that the enormous power of a global brand could be used as a tool to extort consumers. It openly violated the most basic rule of the fast-moving consumer goods industry. You can use chemicals to create the world's most addictive cheap snack, but you must never force ordinary customers to pay the price of a luxury product. You can hire the world's most talented neuroscientists to manipulate the pleasure centers of your customers' taste buds. You can spend enormous amounts of money buying the most expensive Super Bowl advertising slots on the planet to manipulate their feelings of nostalgia. But you can never manipulate an empty wallet struggling against inflation. When food made for ordinary people is priced like a product for the elite, consumers do not stop loving its taste. They do not hate Doritos. They simply wake up and realize that Doritos is no longer worth the money they must sacrifice. The market always finds a way to cleanse itself of arrogance, and sometimes consumer punishment begins with a simple decision to leave that orange bag sitting on the supermarket shelf.